Hi everyone, I'm Little Storyteller Lee, Lei Xiu So Gong Gu. Today I'm opening episode 1 of my new series, Little Storyteller Lee's Guide to Getting Hired. My first topic is about how do you stay relevant for 40 years in your career. When we get out of school, we could be anywhere from 18 years old to in our mid-20s, depending on whether we got a high school degree or a polytechnic or bachelor's or master's. And retirement age is very far away. Not 60 years old anymore, it's 65 or even higher than that. So that means that 40 to 45 years is the minimum that we need to keep plugging along and keep ourselves in the working world. And at the pace where things are changing, depending on the field that you're in, it could be very difficult and discouraging. For example, I was a big deal just by knowing SQL, and knowing SQL and understanding the business and being senior enough to talk to executives and not be shy. That was enough to make me a superstar in 2013. But barely 3 or 4 years later, in 2016 to 2017, there were lots of people who were better in analytics than I was, just because they had a fresh master's degree, but they were able to understand advanced statistics and they were exposed to machine learning. And then now it's 2025. So you're adding maybe 7 or 8 years to that. And things have changed again. To be technically relevant, you need AI, agentic AI, Gen AI, and you also need to upgrade from classical machine learning to deep learning. In a theoretical world, I suppose if I want to be the technical guru of all time, every time there's a new and hot degree, I will go back, get a master's, come out and be the next hot thing. But I'm an adult. By then, I was already coming on 40-something. If I went back to school and got 3, 4, 5 masters, all of it is going to add up into a decade of studying, and each time I would be going back and starting again from mid-levels. When you have a house, you have a mortgage, that just isn't very practical at all. And so to survive, you just have to be strategic about how you bundle your various capabilities and tell your story and make sure that you keep growing. So I feel very blessed right now. I'm 47. I've had 22 productive working years in full-time positions out of a total of 25 years since I first had my bachelor's degree. And even in this year, as I have been looking at my pivot out from analytics, I've got recruiters who called me up about performance marketing positions. Let's start at the beginning. Everybody starts with developing the eye. So the eye shape is about being deep in one specific discipline. Usually it's the one that you have gone to school in. And what you need to do here is, it's very easy to learn how to do things, what the processes are. But don't just stop at processes. Think about the why and the so what. Why is about making notes on what made you successful, what didn't. What is cause and effect? When you pull a certain switch, what does it do and why do you want to do it? And then the so what is about how does this plug into your business? What other areas does it influence? How does it bring money in? Are you reducing costs? Are you increasing revenue? What's happening because of what you do? With AI, you're going to be executing faster. It's going to give you parts of your work, and you need to get far enough up the eye that from day one, you're able to evaluate it. And we all know that AI can be even directionally wrong and still sound very confident about it. So I think the first question you ask yourself is, how correct is this? Is this totally unusable? Or is it usable that needs a little bit of workshopping? Or is this kind of good enough because the task isn't really all that important? And once you do that, you would know how to turn wrong from right and average or good into great to get the results that you want. Now then, your next step is going to be turning your I into either a T or a V. By the time you're 3 to 5 years in, you will probably be the person who's mentoring the fresh grads coming out in your field. and you would be seen as a subject matter expert in where you're in. And this is all about getting more projects, more contacts in order to apply your technical skills. By years 5 to 10, what you would be doing is to solve increasingly complex problems. You'll be working with people in other parts of your org, and you might be leading teams or leading projects. This is when nobody is going to teach you what to do. In fact, you might be solving problems that nobody else has solved in your company before. So then what is a T-shape or V-shape? A T-shape means that you are deep in one part of the T, and that is usually where you develop your I in the first 1 to 5 years of your career. But you are influencing and working with people with a very, very broad range of capabilities. For example, for me, I am maybe medium technical. I know some SQL. I understand all the metrics in performance marketing. I'm not a hardcore data scientist, but I'm also not quite a creative. So to get things done, I can provide the expertise that I have in my field, but I have to work with creatives in order to shape the visual language of what they create into what works for my channels. And I also have to work with the data scientists who are very techy but who might not understand marketing to make sure that data is structured and the right metrics are measured and we're having the right conversations around data in order to get insights about whether what we are doing is working or not. I think the people who go into V-shape are most likely going to be the people who are either more technically inclined or more commercially inclined than me. So if you're technically inclined, then you might be an engineer and then you've coded an app and you want to start your own startup. That's when you start getting really deep into business, into some kind of product management skills in order to be able to market your app even after you have built it. And the other way you could be a V could be the other way around, like being a product manager who understands enough tech to influence feature priorities, but also enough marketing to be able to determine what kind of channels to hit first when growing the revenue from that product. And not everybody is fortunate enough to be able to get promoted for all these years in the same company. In fact, I think most of us are going to find ourselves hopping around and around. But hopping around doesn't mean we shouldn't connect the dots. In fact, all the more we should. So it goes back to the same thing. Just as you're connecting the dots between actions and projects and what works and what doesn't work, do that between your stints and your different companies. Think about what kind of business models have you operated in. Think about what your strengths are and how you drove change in those different companies and what they have in common. And then that's how you define what is your secret sauce. And so that takes us to year 10. By year 10, we've become a guru and a leader in one area. And that's where we either have the opportunities to get deeper and grow into deeper leadership, or we end up having to branch out into another area altogether. When you hit your first T or V, you're probably in your early to mid-30s. So moving is quite easy. It's not too late to get a master's or an MBA or to start over from scratch in a new area. When I came out of my MBA, I took a big demotion. I went from being an almost director level assistant vice president at Changi Airport Group to being a mid-level senior business analyst at Expedia. That meant that for 1 year, I was at the same level as fresh master's grads who had never worked a day in their lives. But the main thing is, in your second S-curve, most likely you'll be able to grow faster because there's aspects of your first S-curve that are going to help you. I was able to get promoted after 1 year from mid to senior because I understood what made businesses work. And so I was able to relate what I was doing in analytics to influence the business. And that means I wasn't looking at my job simply as pulling SQL and pulling numbers, but already I was able to tell stories about what the trends in the numbers meant in terms of future actions and implications for the business. When you do this, you probably want to start thinking also about what you're going to do with the two arcs of your career in the next 5 to 10 years' time and how you're going to bring everything together. That's how you start planning for the 15 to 20-year stage. And you need to be prepared that maybe that's not going to work out. For example, for me, I actually thought I would probably spend about 5 years in private sector, and by then I would be in a managerial role. I would understand something about private sector norms and driven some success, and that's when I could go back to Singapore and go back to government, and I would have my own opinions and be able to be a leader in driving economic development. But as you can see, that never happened. But what happened instead was that I continued to grow in this area, and I had another 10-year arc. So everybody would have a different story. That depends on what you're interested in, or even just having the itch to look at a hot new area and jump in and try that. There's people who have made transitions from engineering to business or from non-tech to tech. So now, fast forward 5 to 10 years, we get to year 20. And that's when you are either an M or a V or an X. Some lucky few are going to be what we call the X shape. And X is all about influence. They are the ones who get promoted to VP roles, where they would be looking at what do we want to be for the company in 3 to 5 years. And they'll be working with leaders of different departments and the C-suite in order to define what that is and to make it happen. But then organizations are pyramids. There's a fat middle where most of us are going to be, and we are not going to be that lucky. So what are we? We are probably either still a V, or people like me who have started all over again in another field would be an M. M means that you've developed a T or V in 2 different areas, and you need to tell the story where those 2 things come together and interrelate. So at this point, at the 20-year mark, there's another crossroads. We can either turn our M or V into an X by becoming a solopreneur or working with startups or growth companies to get ourselves into exec positions, or we could start to grow another arm of the M. I think what we need to do at this stage is to have a really hard look at what our retirement goals are in terms of timelines, finances, and what gives us personal fulfillment. And that's going to help us decide what the shape of our career is going to become. I've considered multiple roads. Some involve FT positions that might go back as low as mid again, and some of them involve solopreneurship or ad hoc freelance work. And for each one of these, I was looking at what is the runway is going to give me. How many more years do I think I'm going to be active before I have to pivot again? And when do I think I see myself having to retire at the end of each of those? In my next episode, I'm going to go deeper into each of these options and talk about what that would entail and where I've decided to focus and why. So stay tuned. But for now, for those of you in the US, wishing you a very happy Thanksgiving and see you again next time.